if you're 2 hours away and he's approached you online, are y'all going to meet? He's already factored that in. Because remember, early on, it's kind of like a job interview, like we put on our best foot forward. And if I know she's 2 hours away and I'm trying to make this work, I am trying to impress. I'm trying to make that good impression. Over time, maybe we'll work out something, but I'm auditioning for her as a man. Although when I talk with them, I say, never audition for a man, I beg you. Because once you choose, you're going to give him your heart. I mean, you're going to be heavily invested in him. So let's be cautious early on.
This is episode number 644 with Bob Grant. He is a relationship specialist, a coach, a podcaster, and he's going to be talking to us about dating advice for highly successful women. Highly successful women often struggle to find their match, and there's a lot of misunderstandings about why they struggle. So hopefully we're going to shed some light on this topic in just a few minutes. Hi, everybody. I am Sandy Weiner, and welcome back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date and to support you on your journey to lasting love. Not only am I a dating and relationship coach for women and men over 40, but I have also written 3 books, and the last book was published in September 2024. And this book is a book for hope. It is called Love at Last, and it's true stories of falling in love later in life. These are really inspirational stories of real people, some of them clients, some were podcast guests, and some were people I didn't know before. And they all have stories that will inspire you to keep searching for your last first date. All of my books are available on Amazon for Kindle or paperback. And before we introduce our guest, I just want to invite you, if you're not yet a member of my Facebook group, it's called Your Last First Date and is for women only. And women over 40 who are searching for a supportive place to get support through the highs and lows of dating. It can be a zoo out there, a jungle, as we say, and it is really important to have a positive place of support. Very few groups out there do that. And we are proud to say that we are a really supportive, amazing group. Join us at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest. His name is Bob Grant, and he is a clinically trained relationship expert, podcaster, and best-selling author of The Woman Men Adore. He's the founder of Relationship Headquarters, where he specializes in helping women emotionally connect with men, attract true love, get married, and for those in a relationship, how to connect and relate more effectively. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
When you propose this topic of successful women and how they struggle to find relationships, this is a topic that I have been playing with for many years because many of the people who come to me are very highly successful women. They do really well at work, and then they don't have healthy relationships, or they're confused about why men don't want to ask them out again. There's a lot of confusion, and I don't want to get into stereotypes here, like gender specific stereotypes, but we do use the terms masculine energy, feminine energy. And so let's start with, how do you define what that masculine energy might feel like, or the feminine energy might feel like?
When I think of it, all of us have some masculine and feminine in us. So no one is like all one or the other. And in general, masculine is more assertive. It gets things done. And at work, we're all masculine. I mean, it's no good to have someone that's passive or receiving at work because they're not carrying the load and we're not having equal share and we're not being able to rely on them. But from a man's standpoint, part of what the feminine is, I tell women do really, probably I think the best is when they're receiving. And that's not a sense of entitlement, but it's a nice compliment as opposed to like which one's better or which one's stronger, that they go well together. And so and just the men I talk with, when we think about feminine energy, generally it comes across as soft, which doesn't necessarily mean weak. It comes across as can be attentive, but it's more from a man's standpoint of it softens us. So one example I use a lot is I say, imagine a man with a daughter, and I have one, so I remember this. And once you have a daughter, your daughter, it's not that she can get anything she wants, but because she trusts you, because you feel the need to protect her, that kind of kicks in that masculine part of you as a dad. And I went to a party not long after I had my daughter, and most of the guys there I'd known, and for some reason, all of us had just had daughters in the last 3 or 4 years. And to a man, each of us were like, every guy needs a daughter. We're like, yeah, you do. As much as we wanted a guy to hang out with and do sports with, there was something about a daughter. And that's that same quality of as a man, I want to take care of someone, not necessarily like a daughter, but it makes me feel more of a man. It makes me feel more masculine when someone trusts, respects, and admires me, as opposed to someone that's got the same qualities that I do, because at times that'll come across as being competitive.
Mhm. So I remember reading Rachel Greenwald's book, Haven't Met Hello. Did you read that book?
I know Rachel Greenwald, but I haven't read that book. No.
Yeah, this is where I first actually read about the difference between how men think about why people don't ask them out again and what men think. And
Mhm.
the number one reason why men didn't ask women out, the women thought it was because they intimidated men, and the men said no, it was because they were too bossy.
Hmm.
And so to me, that's that, not leaving your work self at work. It's not sexy to just be talking about work or bringing that competitive edge. And so, but a lot of women struggle with this idea that, oh, then they have to suppress who they are. So, how can
Mhm.
they bring a little bit more of the softness and leave a little bit of the work at work in order to make that connection and bring out the best in men?
So, as you say that, I remember I had a boss years ago, and she was in charge of our agency, and she would be in charge of the help support staff. And she was, I mean, I say tough but firm, and she had to be. She had like 6 people to manage. I remember she told us one day, she says, y'all wouldn't recognize me when I went home. And we're like, really? And she said, oh no. She goes, when I go home, I talk softer. She goes, you wouldn't believe it. And I'm much more listening and deferring. And I thought that's interesting. And I saw her one day when she left, and it was like when she left, because I was looking for it, when she left the office, it's like she took a coat off and all the stuff that she wore to come in to prepare for the job, it's like she just left it there. And I tell women, I say, you're much better at this than men are. I mean, men are, I hate to say what you see is what you get, but we don't change gears like that. At least it's hard for us. I find women have that capacity, and it's more of which energy do you want to be in? And it's more for which time, what's appropriate. So some of the how to do it, it begins with a conscious choice, as in, how do I want to be treated? And one person described it, do I want to be cherished primarily, or do I want to be respected? I mean, we want both. But cherished is about deferring, cherished is about letting someone take care of you. Again, not like a father. And I get with a client and I slow down with them. Most of them will say cherished, some will say respected. And that cherished thing means if I'm a man, how am I going to show off to you? I mean, I want to be your hero, but how do I do that? Is that about not making a mistake? Okay, that's work. Work, we just cover your tail. But I'm going to have to experiment a little bit, try some stuff. And your emotional reaction is what's going to tell me more than anything else, not your explaining, not your logic. Oh, that's great. But when I get the emotional reaction, I'm like, oh, that worked. And I tell women, so remember, men are kind of binary. We're like, this works, this doesn't work. Now, sometimes women say that's simple. We call it efficient, but it is that sort of black and white with us. So that conscious choice is probably the first thing I'd have someone do. And then they begin experimenting with it and seeing the reaction that has from the men in their life, or if it's dating the guys you're going on a date with.
So that's Pat Allen, by the way, for anybody who
Mhm.
wants to
Mhm.
read her book, Getting to I Do. That was another really pivotal book for me when I first started this work. And I remember reading like, well, I want to be both. I want to be cherished and respected. And she had a perspective on this that it's actually narcissistic to want to be to want to have
Mhm.
respect and be cherished at all times. It's in equal measure. So it's an interesting perspective. I think that we can be respected at work, we can be respected by clients, by our peers, but to be cherished is to be truly loved and to be held at that beautiful place of warmth and love. Receptivity is, you mentioned that a few times, and that can be a really difficult thing for women that I know. I think mostly because they don't trust that if they step back, they're going to receive. And I've worked with women to help them speak up and to be a little bit more assertive in this area without being aggressive and finding that fine balance. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on how women who are not used to receiving because they don't trust, how they can begin to receive better.
So when we're talking about a woman that wants to receive, you're right, I think that's most women or in general. And if I'm talking to a woman, I'm saying we want to influence him and he wants to be influenced by you. But what we want to do is be more of a rewarder than either a teacher or an instructor or a helper. There are times for that, if you're about to get in a wreck or something where you just need to jump in. But the rewarder part means I have to wait until I have something to reward. And that waiting, while it is unnerving to do that, is that space you'll feel to feel uncomfortable because he has to experiment with finding out what you like. You can tell him, but he's going to wait for that reaction to see what you do. And if he's not, see, I want to use that. If he's not reaching out or not making an effort, I want to pay attention because if he's doing that early on, I'm nervous about what he's going to be long term. I mean, every guy's going to make some mistakes, but at the very least, I expect him to try. Even if he doesn't get it right, I expect him to make some effort. And if you fill in the gap with whatever, telling him what you like or jumping in there, you're that's a nice gesture, but you're robbing him of the ability and you're probably missing something you need to see. Because if he's not doing it early on, when you get sick, if you gain 5 pounds or whatever fear you might have, that's going to really show up then. So I want to find out early just something about his character in that space will let him do it, even though it's going to be a little uncomfortable and probably a little unfamiliar to you, and maybe even stir up some memories of when someone did take advantage of you.
Give us an example of how that might look in the early dating process.
He says, would you like to go out or make some offer to her? And again, going back to Pat Allen, she was really good with a lot of the basic stuff of just letting him pick. And he says, what do you want to do? We're not trying to make it a routine per se, but just what would you suggest? She says. And I don't. And again, what he's trying to do is avoid making a mistake. But in doing that, he comes across as more passive. He comes across as I don't want to, take a risk over here, but he must take a risk in order to invest. That's the only way a man falls in love is if he takes certain risk. And so she waits. And then once he makes the suggestion, unless she just hates it, let's just go with that and let him take the lead. And we're just modeling for him that you like him taking risk. You like him investing. Because most men have heard horror stories of, women that have complained, oh, this guy took me to an awful place. Okay, maybe you have, but women still like for you to stick your neck out, to actually show that you're interested. And then one of the ones I find that's toughest for women, and I wonder if you've seen this with people you work with, is a lot of women I know are really not good at taking a compliment. And I think they do it as a way not to be rude or self-centered. But I go, remember, a compliment from a man is a gift. Now, hey, baby, you look great. Let me borrow $10. That's a line. That's awful. Just get rid of those. But in general, even if it's just as simple as thank you or smiling, it'll feel vulnerable because to take a compliment is vulnerable. But that actually conveys value much more so than being strong and confident and like bulletproof. And so I can get someone primarily just to, when you get a compliment, just to treat it as a gift. That'll come across as soft and it'll also soften you.
I think that's a really important point. I think it's important to receive compliments from anyone, not just from the people you're dating, but it's really hard. I mean, I still see my mom, who's 93. She she'll say, "Oh, I don't know why people say I'm beautiful. No, I don't know why people are visiting me." It's just like false modesty
Mhm.
because she spends so much time on her looks and would always say, I don't know why people say."
Mhm.
So it's, most of us grew up in homes where compliments were deflected or they would be answered away like, "Oh, I like your outfit. Oh, yeah, I got it on sale." It just takes away from the gift that the person's giving. And so I learned a long time ago, you just say, "Thank you so much." I once saw on the Steve Harvey show, this woman was talking to Steve and he gave her a compliment. And she said, "I received that, Steve." And I thought that was such great language. Just saying, "I received that." You don't
Mhm.
even need to say thank you. I received that. That is
Mhm.
so kind. So it's just owning that the person gave you a gift. And I love that. I think we can't say that enough because it takes away from the other person for sure. I think that also a lot of times people, women will write a man off. Like you're saying, if a man doesn't plan, we like a man with a plan. We're living in the time of Me Too and all the confusion that's out there. And I think men are afraid to make first moves. Women feel it's too masculine to make first moves. There's so much confusion. So, how do you feel about a woman making a first move in terms of asking a man out or even just in online dating that she sends the message first? Let's start there.
Oh, I think that's a good distinction. So, at least what I've seen, starting with online dating to me is not like the real world because in the real world, a woman can send a signal. I remember John Gray talking about this, about the signal the Venusians would send. And it's true, most guys understand if you don't get some signal for a woman, you're really taking a risk. It can be subtle, but at a party, she might look at him a little longer, or she might gaze, and then there's something that he's approaching toward. Well, online, we don't really have that. And so I tell women is sure, initiate something online, just something because he may not know you're there. There's all these profiles to go through. Usually in person, well, I use this example. I say, pretend the guy's married. I said, no, I'm not saying do this, but if he's married, what could you do at work or someplace to get his attention without being extremely obvious? And they'll pause. I'll say, can you think of something? And then most of them will say, oh, yeah. I say, how about let's do that? It'll be a look. It'll be something that he'll know there's an interest level there. And and you can ask him out and doing that, but usually that's plenty without actually having to do it. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it per se. What I find is if a woman does that, depending on how she wants the balance to be, all of us look for what am I going to do better for a man? How am I going to be your hero? How are we going to complement each other? So if she's used to being in charge or wants to maintain that, and sometimes that does work. I'm not saying that never works. Sometimes it does. But then let's switch that early on in the sense of when he makes, offers or makes gestures, show him your appreciation, make it a point to, like you said, thank you or stuff that you like. And then, of course, of doing that, then he'll be more comfortable taking that lead as long as we just don't get stuck in it. Because sometimes I'll find women that will do this and they'll just wait for the guy to take the lead or do all this stuff. And he's confused because it's like, I didn't know I was supposed to. I just assumed this is the way it was. And so if we're conscious of it, if I'm talking to a woman, if I'm conscious of it as, okay, I probably need to make that shift as opposed to just organically letting it happen.
Yeah, I find that a lot of women are afraid to even make the first move in the online dating world or even ask to get off text and get on a date or get on
Mhm.
a call because some people just they also don't really know if you're really interested because a lot of people are too subtle and hint around things and men are like, just tell me. Just tell me
Mhm.
how you feel.
Mhm.
Just tell me what you
Mhm.
want. So, if let's say, and I know a lot of women who overdo it when it comes to the men in their lives, like they'll do all the heavy lifting, they'll drive the further distance, they'll make the plans because they feel bad because he's busy. And And I really have a problem with that because I feel like it's not equitable. And I'm curious what you have to say about that kind of relationship where they care a lot about each other, but she's taking all of his excuses and accepting them all.
Yeah, I think what you said, Sandy, about it's unequitable, and she's doing the heavy lifting because they feel bad for him. And one of the things I tell women is I said, let's don't ever feel sorry for a man. I mean, if his mom died, let's be gracious, put your arm around him. If something is totally out of his control, absolutely. But men, our self-esteem is, I think, based on one, overcoming obstacles, and two, accomplishing things. That's good for us. It's not just that we should. We grow because we have this inherent fear of, am I enough? And we're constantly doing stuff to not so much kill that, but to grow with that. And that's why a restless man is a man that's in trouble. A guy that's not working or being productive is going to have lots of trouble in life. And so when she does those things for him that he could, it's not even so much should or ought to. I mean, there's certainly a time for her to be gracious and maybe I'll meet you halfway. But when women tell me this, I say, no, I have to know them. I say, whose problem is that? And they say, I don't know. I say, it's his problem because we like solving problems. Now, I don't mean like a sense of demanding and you owe me kind of stuff, but if you're 2 hours away and he's approached you online, are y'all going to meet? He's already factored that in because remember early on, it's kind of like a job interview, like we put on our best foot forward. And if I know she's 2 hours away and I'm trying to make this work, I am trying to impress. I'm trying to make that good impression. Over time, maybe we'll work out something, but I'm auditioning for her as a man. All the women I talk with, I say, never audition for a man, I beg you. Because once you choose, you're going to give him your heart. I mean, you're going to be heavily invested in him. So let's be cautious early on. As long as it's not a sense of entitlement, as long as we're not demanding. But I like the idea of this is my preference, or I'm not comfortable with, or it would mean a lot to me. Just something. Because if I'm a man hearing that, oh, I can do that. She's not doing a sense of entitlement. That would make her happy. Oh, yes, I can. Getting in a car is no big deal. Making her happy is much harder. So as a man, give me a task any day over having to read her mind.
Yeah. Making her happy is important and giving him the recipe. Like, here's
Mm-hmm.
what I would love more of.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to a client last night who this guy she's been seeing for a long time was supposed to come over and spend the night and then help her out with something in the house. And he called the last minute and said, it's not going to work out. I'll see you in the morning. And she is not used to speaking up. So we're working on that together. But some of the language I gave her was to say, and I'm really sad that you're not coming. I was really looking forward to seeing you and spending time with you. And is there any way that you can make this happen? It would make me so happy. And it's
Well,
too
that's
late.
good. That's
Oh, you
so
like
good.
that?
I like that.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
It's just shifting our language because that's not how we're programmed. We're programmed to shut down, to think, oh, our needs are too much and we shouldn't ask because if he wanted to, he would, and that's not true. So there's a lot of myths out there. Something else that I was thinking about while you were talking is the whole idea of who pays on a first date and or who pays in the beginning of dating. This comes up all the time, and you're talking more traditionally about men taking the lead. I'm curious what you think about who pays.
So in general, I would suggest women let him pay, not because he owes you. I mean, he doesn't owe you anything. Because I tell them, think about when you're not interested in a man. You don't let him pay. If you can tell halfway through, you grab your purse, whatever, and you're making, at least not in general, is like, I don't want to give him any impression because letting him pay does show your interest. And now, certainly it can be for someone overdoes it or someone's just rigid about it and hints. But going back to what we had said, as a man, I can make more money. I can work a little extra. But I can't go to Walmart and look across from someone that I'm trying to impress and see her smile. That's hard. That doesn't come along every day. So if paying for the meal makes you happy, oh, okay. And that's easy. At least that's generally how we think. That's why, and men that are real rigid about that, I'm not saying write them off, but when women tell me this about how blunt he was, I'm like, oh, I don't know what that is. Maybe let's give him another chance. But if we're rigid with that, I'm worried that's going to come up someplace else. So I don't really care as much as much as what's behind it, or why is it such a big deal to the guy? Because you did offer to do this, and you're right. There's a time later on, sure. At some point, she pays as it gets on, but and it is stereotypical. But I like cheats that make it clear. Um, this is a signal I like you. This is a signal I'm impressed. I'm flattered. Those things, I don't know that those are ever going to go out of style.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are a lot of people who are very rigid on both sides about this. And there are women who will say, can I pay half without even waiting for him to offer to pay? And I tell them not to offer right away because it's not about the money. It's about the intention behind it. It's
Mhm.
about showing interest that I'm investing time, energy, money, care into getting to know you because I value you. And I think money is one of the ways that we show interest. It's just the way it is. I think that, one of the lines that I like to use is, do you need help with that when the bill comes?
Oh, that's
And
good.
you like that?
I do like that. Uh-huh.
I'll tell you what. Well, I'd love to hear why you like it because I feel like it brings out something in men that is very different from can I split the bill? So tell me why you
Yes,
like it.
I tell you, I like that is because it's an easy no, I've got this. It really signals that I can take care of this. As opposed to it's not a mixed message of we're equal, we're fair. Because if I'm on a first date, I don't know. I think you like me, but I'm not totally sure. And if you rush to the bill, I may make the wrong impression or might read it wrong what you're doing. But it also lets me point out, I'm going to use a guy term, from a power standpoint. I've got this. I've got this taken care of. And this is, I've already planned for this. I may not say it that way, but I might say it that way if someone said that. But it's an easy way, but it's a nice gesture. I appreciate the thought, but I've got this. It makes it
Yeah.
easy for me to do that when you say that.
That's good to hear. I think I've got this as the three most sexy words. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just to
Mm-hmm.
know that somebody's got your back.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of women do that to men and kind of take away that the pleasure of saying, I've got you, because they're so used to not having somebody have their back. So I know this is very, kind of very polarized in terms of how men behave and women behave, but I think it's old courtship rules that I think are still at play. I think that once you're in a relationship, it does become more equitable. People, even a few dates in, you pick up the tab, you pick up the tip, you pay the valet, you get concert tickets a little further down, then you start having them over for meals. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's what happens in my experiences. I get the women who on the second date have planned the six-course meal and had the guy sleep over and he never called again, and now they don't know why because they've kind of shot their whole load at one time. And it's like I'm investing in you, but you haven't even shown me that you are interested, except that we have great conversation and we have sexual compatibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sort of overinvestment too quickly is, and it's a lot of times it's good intention in the sense of it's a nice thing to give and to be gracious with someone. But just like when I made cookies years ago and the recipe said, I think it was 2 cups of sugar, and I thought, okay, well, 2 cups is good. 8 cups will be even better. So I put 8 cups in there, and yes, you've cooked. So anyway, they came out like syrup. It just was
Yeah.
awful, and I realized, oh, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. Okay,
Mhm.
there really is a reason for the recipe. And when a woman will pace it or go slower and not overgive, if they need a rule of thumb, it's remember giving's masculine. I mean, it's a great thing. Women are really good at it, but it's a proactive thing. And receiving's feminine. And as a man, if someone outgives me, they don't intend this. It'll feel like she's my mother. It doesn't mean her intention is bad. And if she does it too soon with him, men have to usually think and feel when they bond. What intensity, we love intensity, but it doesn't have a long-term effect on us. We have to feel intense, go think, feel intense, and we're always playing catch up. I mean, you ladies are so much better at this emotional stuff than we are. And so we'll make signals that are wrong. So if it's really intense too soon, we get overwhelmed. Now that's some of that's our responsibility to pace ourselves. Some of that's on us. And so I ask women, I say, remember, if you're good at giving, I love the gift, but let's don't overuse your gift. There's a time for that because overusing it will give the wrong impression that you're tougher than you are. You're always a giver. No, you're not. You have limitless to give. No, you don't. And let him get to grow, to get to know you. Because that's my fear too, that something fast will happen like that. And something that could have been really good, gets blown up early, even though the intention was good.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts, like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last first date to learn more and claim this offer. There's more value to something that develops over time, that, it's a richer gift than trying to sell somebody on yourself on the first encounter. I mean, I've had people before I even talk to them, they have sent me their entire life story, information I never wanted to know, I didn't ask for. And it actually made me respect them less because they felt the need to share everything. So oversharing is a boundary crossing. It is saying, I need to prove who I am so that you'll like me. And that is a weakness and not a strength,
Yeah, I like how you mentioned about it, how it devalues. I think that's a good way to put it. I'm nervous, so therefore I want to see me a certain way versus allowing you to see me however you do, and
Yeah.
me, letting go of that control, and maybe you don't like what you see, but that's just a sign that we're probably not a good fit, as opposed to
Mhm.
there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. And, have the confidence to know that slow and steady, that somebody who wants to get to know you, give them enough to know enough about you to create some interest. And so when I work with clients, I also work on revealing their stories slowly in layers,
Mm.
because revealing the entire life story is just it's a bad formula for disaster.
And a lot of times with revealing all that story is that we can't put the context into it. So our friends know our whole story, but they know the rest of us as well. And so
Mm.
my weirdness is kind of funny to them. But if I try to present one thing, it doesn't make sense to the other person that gets this one slice of what I think they need to know. And remember, a lot of us, the things that people really love about us are not always what we think they'd be. It
Mhm.
may be a sense of humor or the way you're a good listener or something that you can't really describe when you're trying to build up this ideal person you want them to see you as. So it's actually a way of losing control when you do that.
Yeah, it's true. You talk about weirdness. I belong to Toastmasters for the last 10, 11 years. And in our last meeting, we had somebody speak for the first time. She had been a member for 2 years. She's actually president of the club. And her whole thing was about being a nerd. And she goes, probably you don't know this about me. So she started out with, she does like a very important job. It's like, quality control in this company. And then she goes, but here's something people don't always know. And she talked about cosplay, and she talked about how she's into video games. And it gave me this whole other dimension of who she is. I've known her for a long time. I didn't know any of these things. And I thought it was so cool to find out.
Mm.
But I think if the first time she met me, she said to me, oh, yeah, I'm into cosplay and I'm really into Mario, so I'd be like, I have
Mhm.
no idea how to relate to that.
Uh-huh.
So it was very cool to learn, but it also, because I knew other parts of her first. And now it's like, oh, there's this whole other dimension to you that makes you such an interesting person.
Yeah, I like the time aspect of what you said, that that time helps us to kind of get it gradually and sink in, and it feels like it's my choice. I'm getting to know you versus you're selling me, and you
Yeah,
you must do this and you have to do this over here. I'm like, well, what if I'm not ready for that? Oh, no, no, this is folks don't mean it that way, but it'll feel that way when we're like, no one likes to be pushy sold like that. And that has that same
exactly.
flavor too if we try to rush it, I think.
Yeah, it feels icky when somebody tries to, it's like a dump, really. I've had people
It is
dump
like a
on
dump.
me.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like you've just dumped your whole life out. I don't know what to do with it. Somebody once actually came to a date with note cards that he had taken on me. He found out my last name without me giving it to him. It was so creepy, which I went back to a screen name online because I didn't want anybody to do that again. But he comes to the date with note cards in his pocket and he's like, I'm really mad at you. And I said, why? And he goes, because I stayed up all night looking up all the things that were online about you. And then he pulls the note cards out of his pocket and he starts reading up. So you have this many children, you live here, these are things that happened to you, you were married to this person. And I was just like, oh my God, that was really creepy. That was also information I was not ready to share. And he happened to look, which is why I don't give my last name, because I don't want people looking me up and forming an opinion before they meet me. So that was one of the those went up there as one of the creepiest dates I've ever had.
I'm stupefied. I know we all get nervous and do stuff. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I can't
that was a
imagine.
bad one.
Yeah, because
All right,
part of it
let's
is it's more of what we do with the insecurities, what we do, because that's great. He was nervous about meeting you. If I'm talking to him,
yeah,
I'm like, awesome. If you're nervous, nice job. But let's don't put that responsibility on her to like
yeah.
make you feel better and all. Yeah, wow.
That was a very short date.
Yes.
So you have a term, speaking of nervousness, emotional authenticity. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So authenticity is about being matched with what's going on with us. So I think about some clients I've had over the years, women, and they're telling me something, and maybe it's something painful. And especially when I would have an office and they would start to cry. And invariably, because I'm a man and it's uncomfortable for them, they'll say, I'm sorry. And I would usually tell them, I said, well, I'd say, sorry for what? I'm crying I said, well, I'm probably more flattered that you feel safe enough to cry with what you're telling me. Because if they would laugh when they're talking about the death of their father, see, I don't get it. I don't know what's funny about that. Or if they just tell me with a blank face or something. And authenticity, because when it matches up, we can relate to people. What a lot of people get confused that with is transparency, where we just share everything. So transparency is no good. Small children do that. They have this tiny feeling and they just tell everybody about it or scream and holler. But authentic, it does require vulnerability. But authentic from a man's standpoint is it makes it safe for him because we're not good with emotions and we tend to lean on you ladies for that. And so if you're okay with feeling a bunch of stuff, all right, then I don't have to. I can tell you if I'm upset about something. I don't, for us, it comes across as that you're not fragile because rigid will come across as fragile much more so than authentic. So I'd rather someone say, if they're mad, that really upset me. That's why I like what you said earlier about with the sad, because when you said it, what you told your client, I mean, you're not talking to me, but I can feel that right when you said it. I'm like, yeah, that wouldn't be sad. So I can instantly see that. And that makes it easier for me to either meet with you and say, sorry about that. I can see your point. Or if I'm a jerk, I'm just going to double down as I get over it. But either way, you're going to get good feedback from that.
Mm. So you're trying to help women trying to help men understand their emotions and that if they feel safe enough with you, they will share all of the feelings they have. They will feel safe enough not to just show up as happy all the time because that's fake. I mean, I want the same from a man, to be honest. I don't want a man to always show me some inauthentic side that he's always strong and never has any weakness. I also don't want him to cry every time he's with me. So I
Mhm.
think it's finding that balance. But I like that you bring up safety because so many people do not feel safe in their relationship and they don't feel safe enough to bring up these kinds of things. And that's one of the things that I do the most in my work is to help women really learn to express themselves more authentically. Because if we're not vulnerable and we come across as these tough people who we can handle everything, I had a guy recently say to me, "Are you okay if I pay?" I'd never been asked that.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
I've had men take the
Mhm.
bill and go, "I got this." But he said, "Are you okay for me to pay?" And I said, "Absolutely. I love
Mhm.
being treated. It really makes me
Mhm.
happy."
Well,
And
that's good.
so, but then the next date, he got a little weird around the money situation. So, and then do we have to discuss it every time? Should I be
Mhm.
offering at the next thing? Do I pay for the movie if you pay for the dinner? I mean, there's just there's so much confusion if we're not just going, do you want me
Yeah.
to help you out with that?
Well, especially with yours, part of the reason I like the first thing was it's so simple when I'm hearing that to go, it makes me happy. I mean, that's really all I want from a woman early on is it's not really complicated. She just likes it. Okay. And like you said with the second one, if that made her happy and now you're getting weird about it, I'm talking to the guy, I'm like, what are you, if I know him, I can say this. I'm like, what are you doing? She just gave you a clue that that works. And for most men, okay, now I know it works. I'm building my cheat sheet with her. Okay, that. And so for a woman, that should feel confusing. That would, because that confuses me as to why he would do that. But, and to your point, when you do that, what I find with a woman's emotions is it reveals a man, not instantaneously, but that one to me did, is that I already told him he liked it. And the next one, he's getting whatever weird is, or he's double second guessing or whatever because that kind of stuff with him is going to show up in other areas. We don't have
Yeah,
to be
it
detective. Yes.
it did.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you're paying attention, you're right. It's like so here's another example. The same person had his phone out during the first date, and for a good reason. It was a child who was
Hmm.
possibly struggling to get home, and so he needed to have his phone out. Totally good. He talked about it. He
Hmm.
apologized for it. The second date, he had his phone out for a terrible reason, and he just kept apologizing, but he kept checking his texts. And then we saw a movie, and he had his phone out during the movie, and I was just like, this
Hmm.
guy cannot put his phone away. To
Hmm.
me, that is attention. That is a
Hmm.
lack of attention. That is a lack of focus. The fact that you cannot be present with me for an hour and a half is a problem because this is our second date. And so pay attention to these signs because they don't get better over time.
Hmm.
Like if you have stated, I had a guy once say to me, "I'm putting my phone away because I want to pay attention to you." Like, say that out
Hmm.
loud. That is a
Hmm.
beautiful statement. And, for women who, I once had a guy say to me also, because I had offered to help out with the bill after a few dates. And he said, "I never will take money from you, but I really appreciate that you offered."
Oh,
And I
wow.
think, yeah.
Hmm.
So, having these open, honest conversations that are authentic is so important. Um, so let's talk a little about surrender. You use that word, and you say that ambitious, successful women find that word uncomfortable.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about the difference between surrendering and being powerless or giving up your power.
So to me, surrender is like yield, and it's a choice that I make. And it's a lot of the women that taught me this. They would use different phrases, and they would talk about, especially ones that had careers that were whether attorneys or and they were like, I do this stuff all day long where I make decisions and make stuff happen. They're like, I just want to come home and have someone do stuff. Now that was a broad statement. And it wasn't that they couldn't do it. When they were single, they'd make sure everything happened. But it's more of it's not that I can or I have to, it's I don't want to. So the first thing I'm asking them in is, can we get in touch with what do you really want? It's not for me to tell you how to do it, but how do you want to be loved? Or how do you want to be cared for? Or how do you want to be treated? Again, forget the rules. What's your preference? And if they identify, and most I talk with do, would say, yeah, I'd rather have someone, that's, they'll say it differently, but someone that I can put my head on his shoulder or someone I don't have to worry about. And probably this is a little different what you said, but the one I saw, the one that shocked me the first time was when there's a woman I'm talking with, and I forgot what her career was, and she was, I forgot, she's 35 or 38. And she goes, yeah, she goes, I don't want to work anymore. Now, as a man at that age, I'm thinking, what are you talking about? Didn't mean she wanted to stop working. What she didn't want was to have all the responsibility that went with it, and all the responsibility on her is what she didn't want. And I started hearing that from more women, was just, and why they wanted a partner, and they like not having to bear all that burden on their own. And so surrendering to me is letting a man take care of you, and that you don't have to bear it all alone. That may be different with each one. The thing I'm trying to guard against with those is that if a woman says, I don't need a man, I say, I get where you're coming from. I mean, like, I'm not so dependent. I said, but to men, going back to the Pat Allen, the narcissistic thing, it's going to come across like, I don't need anybody. And he's going to think, well, what do you need me for? So I would say, if I know him, I say, let's lose that phrase. I know what you mean, and say it differently. So I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, no, that's an important thing. I mean, obviously, you have to have trust and you have to have built a foundation for somebody to be able to surrender to somebody's desire to care for you. They have to show you that they have a desire to care for you and you can trust them to do it. I think when it comes to you come home and you don't want to do it all, you've got to be clear about that. And I have said that, like when it comes to planning, I've told men I plan all day. I am in charge of my business. I have a family. I make a million decisions. I would love for you to plan a
Mm,
date. It would make
mm,
me so happy
mhm,
because it's one less thing for me to plan. And also just give a little bit of feedback as to what would be a great date, or ask him to come up with three ideas and then you pick one. Like it doesn't have to be so complicated or so gender, divided. He
mhm,
plans, a lot of women will not go on a date with a man who hasn't planned. And I think women have to be clear. Like, I love when men plan. Maybe you don't trust anybody to plan anything, but then I think you need to check yourself. But the other thing about not needing a man, and I think I just want to touch on that before we end in a few minutes. Um, I think that a lot of people who have had bad relationships feel they don't need to be in a relationship because they don't want to repeat the horror of the relationship that they had. And I think that that's an important distinction. I think it's important to picture a relationship with somebody who's actually going to care for you and going to add value to your life, which a lot of people have never experienced.
Yeah, I like that distinction. And as you're saying this, I was thinking about especially those women that are successful and that put a lot of effort, like you were talking about. You have a business to run, you have these things to manage. And I remind them, I say, look, the man you're talking about likes that part of you. He likes it because he sees you as a peer. And ultimately, men don't use this phrase. What we really want is a best friend. So if I'm someone that's cranking it all day at my business, or I've got these things going on, I don't just want someone to come home to or to date that just says yes to everything. I want to bounce ideas off of her. I don't necessarily need her to like know my industry perfectly, but I like her aptitude. I like her creativity. I like the fact I can say stuff and she gets it. So to me, that's a tremendous asset when a woman has that. And then, when she's soft with that, and when she admires him, again, assuming he's admirable, that's the perfect blend for him, because my best friend is really what men are after. They just describe it in weird ways. But when they find that, I've got a bunch of buddies that are in wonderful marriages, and that's what all of them would say to a man. It's just, oh yeah, she's absolutely my best friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what sustains, because
Hmm.
all that fairy tale stuff that we think relationships are it's just false. It might start out with a lot of chemistry and excitement, but you can't sustain that. That's not real. That's a fairy tale. And so real is, are they there in times of crisis? Are they are
Mhm.
you having fun together? I mean, can you go to them and trust them with their advice? Are they somebody you look up to and admire and respect? And so I have people asking themselves those questions on a first date. Is how did my body feel on this date? Am I bored? Am I
Mhm.
excited? Am I curious to know anything more about them? A lot of times you feel like I'm so not curious about this person. They've kind
Mhm.
of told me everything that I need to know, and there's no connection. But we base our decisions on all the wrong things. Is there sexual chemistry? Do
Mhm.
they have status?
Mhm.
Are they tall? Like these are
Mhm.
totally unimportant in the realm
Mhm.
of this long-term friendship that you're looking for.
Yeah, when I ask women to get them out of their head, because it's hard not to notice 100 things if we're taking all these sensory data points in, is there's one in particular I'm thinking of. She was a physician and she really wanted to get married and she'd accomplished so much, but she would get all these different variables. And if one didn't line up, oh, that's the one I don't want to have in my life. And we did something different. I said, what I want you to do is, whoever you go out with, I want you to find out something about him that's interesting. I don't care what he does, but and what I found, what it did was it got her out of her head because it's a first date. I mean,
Mhm.
we don't know a lot. I mean, unless we get this awful feeling inside, because she would have feelings that didn't make sense. I'm like, you don't know him well enough. Again, unless there's something obvious, like he's not paying attention on the phone, something we can see. And that shift for her was really good because she started becoming lighter and putting less pressure on it. And now the relationship started to pace better. And she would come back and tell me, yeah, I don't know if I'll go out with this guy again, but he had some interesting hobby and another one did this. And she could feel the difference in her body that she was causing a lot of it for her with trying to anticipate and this, to not make a mistake. She was overanalyzing everything. So I love the idea of paying attention to how you feel around them. I find sometimes that might take a few dates till you really get a sense of who this person is. I mean, unless they're doing something obvious.
Mm. Yeah, it's a good point of looking for something interesting. I think we ask all the wrong questions. We want to know what they do for a living, what religion they are, how long they've lived, where they live. None of these things matter. Right? It's like
Mhm.
I have a client who always asks on a first message to women, how long have you lived wherever you live? Like, I'm like, you're not going to get anything out of that.
Right.
That means nothing. I don't give five
Hmm.
years, 2 months. Did you learn
Hmm.
anything? No.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um, anyway,
It's
so, just trying to get a little deeper, trying to find out what they do for fun. Like, what's a weird thing about them? I don't know what, just people also get too deep and they get too surface. It's messed up. So my final question to you, what are your final words of advice for ambitious women who want to go on their last first date?
so I love the title of this podcast. I think that jumped out when I was kind of looking around. I thought, oh, that's perfect.
Mm, thank you.
So if there's a mindset, I would say is, can you have an attitude of curiosity early on? One, it will soften you. Well, it's not that you have to be soft all the time. We're just showing him that you can do that. We're just reminding him that this is my phrase, it's all of this and brains too, that you're all of it, but we're not explaining that to him. Because curious has just a natural quality that friends have. Doesn't mean I'm peppering you with 1,000 questions, but curious gets me out of my head and I'm not trying to make a big impression. And it becomes more like a friendship. It's just, can we even talk? Can we get past this? Because really your goal on the one date is just to get another one, or at least the offer. You may not want to, but if I'm doing that, it reminds me of a guy I knew in high school, and Mitch was pretty good looking, but he was nice to all the girls. And it showed, and all of them noticed that. So he didn't behave differently. Didn't matter if they were tall, short, freshman, senior. He treated them all the same. And even then, that made an impression on me. And that's what I want for every woman is you treat all men the same. Doesn't mean you go out with all of them. And when that's the case, then the men you're interested in, you won't feel that much of a need to do stuff different because you're just genuinely curious and interesting anyway, which I
Mhm.
think you probably are, which is one of the reasons you're successful. You're rarely successful if you're just rigid in how you do things. I'd like him to get a taste of that early on so he gets to see that side of you.
Curiosity is so important. That's a great tip.
Mm.
Bob, I think you have a free gift for us. What Men Find Irresistible. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we had women that would ask about, what a guy's like, and they're asking a general question. So I went back and took some time and spent a few days kind of diving in. And it's something like this. We say curiosity is one aspect, is women wouldn't necessarily think of it that way, but if, like in going through and explaining it, they've probably done it in other things. They just didn't know what they did. So our goal with this is you're probably doing these things, but if we can consciously say, hey, keep an eye on these, it's the same thing I would tell men about. Remember, women like to feel safe financially, emotionally, physically. So just keep an eye. Don't do stuff that makes her feel nervous. Just don't do that, and you'll be ahead of the pack versus just assuming she gets your humor or assuming you're going to joke with her like she's a guy. She's not a guy. Don't do that. So this is a guideline like that. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. Most of them are like, wow, this is more meaty than I thought. Okay, good. Because it's designed to be really tangible, touchable, that you can start practicing with it tonight.
Awesome. So the link will be in the show notes along with all your other social media links. Everything is at Relationship Headquarters. Basically, just Google that. Bob Grant, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing this important information, because I think this is a topic that often becomes very polarized and very misunderstood, especially in today's world where women are feminists and they think this is anti-feminist, but I don't think it is. I think it actually helps people who are successful to have better relationships and to get unstuck. So I appreciate the work you do. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Sandy. I enjoyed being here.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for listening. If you love our show, please give us a high rating on Apple Podcasts. We will be your best friends. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.